When I think of original characters created for Batman the Animated Series, there are two names that immediately jump out at me. First of all, Harley Quinn. Yeah, okay. She's literally one of the most popular DC characters now. DC President, Publisher and Chief Creative Officer Jim Lee even called her DC's fourth pillar, along with Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman. The second character is Officer Renee Montoya. According to voice actress Ingrid Aliu, Renee Montoya has a huge lesbian following.
I have fans, of course, Stand and Deliver, and then there's Real Women Have Curves. These are iconic films.
Yeah.
Batman has, the fan base is different, but through Facebook, I have friends all over the world, and she does have a big lesbian following.
Really?
Yes.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool when a certain group of people just locks into a character, too. It's like, this is very meaningful.
Yeah.
Given that it's Pride Month, I know I just about made it. And I like to think that I'm a good ally. Let's take a look at how Renee Montoya went from a background beat cop to a modern queer icon. So one really interesting fact about Montoya that may surprise you is that while she was created for BTAS, DC managed to sneak her into Batman number 475 over 6 months before BTAS aired. The Batman comic book staff, specifically Denny O'Neil I believe, was so enamoured with what he had seen of the show during the production stages that he wanted to better synergise the comics with the upcoming cartoon by bringing one of their new characters into the main DC continuity. And they chose Renee Montoya. The thing with Montoya is that she didn't really have a huge role in the show, but according to the writer's Bible for the show, she was originally due to have a more significant role, but these plans were scrapped, presumably when Alan Burnett came on board as the new producer and decided to take the whole show back to the drawing board. The same writer's Bible provided a full backstory for Montoya, a woman who had lost her husband, a fellow police officer, to crime and worked to improve her impoverished neighbourhood. But it's important to remember that none of this backstory was ever mentioned in the show. The writer's Bible cites Montoya as someone that is critical of Batman and doesn't like the way he does things, but that never comes across in the show. So I think it's pretty safe to disregard all of this characterization for Montoya. I mean, after all, the writer's Bible is full of unused or scrapped material, such as describing Clayface as a low-level goon with a secret elixir that allows him to temporarily change shape, or Mr. Freeze as a disgruntled scientist, so take it with a pinch of salt. If you're interested in learning more, I did a 3-part read-through of the entire document, at least a version of the document that is available to the public, so go ahead and check that out. Despite these changes, or perhaps because of them, Montoya had one significant episode, P.O.V, or P.O.V if you prefer. In this episode, 3 people, Detective Bullock, Officer Montoya, and the rookie Wilkes, report to Internal Affairs to explain how a sting operation that had been in the works for months went wrong, and a sizable sum of cash went missing. Internal Affairs thinks that the 3 officers are on the take and it's up to them to argue their innocence. To kick things off, let's take a look at the title card. It looks like a grey, ambiguous jigsaw puzzle with a single missing piece, which is a neat summary of this mystery story. And I don't know about the rest of you, but it also looks a bit like a brain to me. This episode is essentially Kurosawa's Rashomon, but set in Gotham City. Of the 3 officers, Bullock outright lies about events, downplaying his own mistakes and blaming them on Batman. Wilkes misunderstands the things that he sees, believing Batman to be some sort of mythical creature, while Montoya provides the most accurate testimony, showing her to be honest, dependable and level-headed. There's one scene during Montoya's flashback that really sticks out to me. One of the crooks in the warehouse brandishes a large drill and thus earns the nickname Driller. He's seen leering at Montoya before lunging at her, with the drill acting as a substitute phallus. Unsurprisingly, this scene had to be toned down and shortened because of this unpleasant subtext. While all 3 are suspended from duty pending the outcome of Internal Affairs' investigation, Bullock and Wilkes disappear for the rest of the episode. Instead, we follow Montoya on her commute home. Despite being suspended, she still attempts to solve the crime, and a chance glance out of the train window allows the final piece of the puzzle to slot into place. Montoya saves the day, captures the crooks, reclaims the stolen money, and rescues Batman in the process, earning her and her peers' badges back. The mystery boss of the gang is never revealed to be anyone significant, despite his face being shrouded for most of the scenes. This is usually a trick saved for when they are a character that we would recognise, and they want the reveal to be a surprise. I have to wonder if he wasn't originally intended to be Officer Hackle from Internal Affairs, who had suspended Montoya and co, but I feel like that reveal wouldn't have been satisfying. Hackle is suspicious, opinionated, and a reactionary asshole, not a corrupt cop trying to pin the blame on someone else. And it was quite satisfying to see Commissioner Gordon push him around at the end of the episode. Although at the same time we know that Gotham is a corrupt city and the GCPD has its bad eggs, so maybe Hackle was right to assume the worst about the trio. Outside of this episode, Montoya doesn't really do very much. She's in the background for several episodes, investigating crime scenes, doing general grunt work, etc. They could have made her a more prominent side character in a show that was kind of lacking on a diversity front, but ultimately she was relegated to the background. And yes, it is a shame we don't see more of her, but she does get one very cool scene at the end of Harley and Ivy, where she gets her own Lord of the Rings Eowyn moment.
No man can take us prisoner! All right, ladies, raise 'em.
In The Adventures of Batman and Robin, Montoya is no longer a beat cop. Instead, she seems to have become a detective, based on the fact that she now wears a suit and not a uniform. Yeah, it's a little disappointing we never saw the story behind her promotion, but I suppose it was probably just the fact that she had passed a test, which I don't think would have been the most exciting of episodes now that I think about it. In the new Batman Adventures, Montoya wears a black turtleneck with a pistol holster, which reminds me of Shaft, and I dig it. Now that we have her animated history out of the way, let's get back to Montoya's appearances in the comics. As I mentioned earlier, she debuted in the comics about 6 months before BTAS first aired, but her character arc in the comics followed a very similar trajectory. Her original role cast her as the new assistant to Commissioner Gordon, although she did end up being partnered with Harvey Bullock. She still mostly served as a background character with minimal character development. Montoya didn't start having a significant role until the No Man's Land storyline, where Gotham gets flattened by an earthquake and cut off from the rest of the USA, leading to a turf war between the people left behind. Montoya's role was an enforcer for the Blue Boys, the heroic gang made up of former GCPD officers led by Jim Gordon. However, she would later be kidnapped by Two-Face and held hostage for months, where she and the disfigured former district attorney would develop a bond. Following No Man's Land in the space year 2000, she and the rest of the GCPD were given a more prominent role in Detective Comics, written by Greg Rucka. This era of Batman comics is among my favourites. I particularly like the colouring of the post-No Man's Land issues of Detective Comics. Each issue only really used 2 colours, and it looked amazing. The artwork by Sean Martinborough and others is wonderful, with a rich, dark, shadowy atmosphere that really reminds me of BTAS in some places. Montoya also appeared in the new series Gotham Central, also written by Greg Rucka and Ed Brubaker, who is the head writer of the upcoming Batman Caped Crusader cartoon, by the way. Gotham Central is an excellent procedural crime comic that tells stories from the perspective of the elite GCPD detectives that work under Commissioner Gordon. Batman's barely in this comic, but we get to see normal everyday people interacting with the costume criminals of Gotham City. Think of it as Batman meets NYPD Blue. I can't recommend it enough. Famously, Montoya was outed as a lesbian in the award-winning Half a Life story in Gotham Central, in which she was also framed for the murder of the person that outed her. I won't spoil anything else about the story because it's one of my favourites and I want you all to read it. The entire run of Gotham Central is available on the DC Universe Infinite app, and a hardcover omnibus of the entire series was published in 2022, so go pick it up. Montoya went on to develop some self-destructive tendencies as a self-loathing queer Catholic, self-medicating with booze and violence in the face of hostility towards her from her fellow officers and an unaccepting family. It's true there had been queer characters in DC Comics before, notably Metropolis Special Crimes Unit Captain Maggie Sawyer, and notice the subtle reference to her sexuality in Superman the Animated Series. But Montoya's sexual identity is far more overt and paved the way for more queer characters like Kate Kane's Batwoman and John Kent's Superman. In the comics, Montoya has also adopted the identity of The Question, which I'm not really a huge fan of. I prefer her to be a more grounded frontline detective. But in the current comic books, she's now the Gotham City Police Department Commissioner, replacing Jim Gordon, although she does periodically still moonlight as The Question. Well, that's all very well and good, I hear you say, but the comic book version of Montoya is entirely separate from the animated version, right? Well, actually, I'd say that Montoya has become a rare example of a cartoon character feeding into the comics, and then the comics feeding back into the animated universe version. In the second season of Batman Adventures Continue, the comic book continuation of The New Batman Adventures, Montoya's sexuality was confirmed with the introduction of her girlfriend, Gloria Navarro. I know there will be some people that are quick to shriek, "Not canon!" But if Paul Dini and Alan Burnett say that this is the continuation of TMBA, then that's good enough for me, even if there are some little continuity missteps like the Joker having HBO Max, or Deathstroke referencing September 11th, assuming he's not just using the Spinal Tap scale of 1 to 11, despite the fact that the show takes place in the late 90s. Some people point to the show Bible to disprove this characterization, but as I've already said, much of that information in the document was scrapped, And Batman Adventures Continue artist and longtime DCAU tie-in comic writer Ty Templeton clearly stated on Twitter, DCAU Montoya is gay. Official DCAU creator right here says so. And really, it doesn't get clearer than that.